Sometimes you want to go into your game and kill giant beasts, level entire cities with your incredible power. Other times, you want to throw a rager and shotgun nail with your bros. This week on Scheduled for Launch, join me, Zach Walsh, as I talk with Geoffery Golden about his 5e module, Target Run. This hilarious piece, inspired by classic Slobs vs. Snobs movies of the 80s and 90s, will have you working together to enjoy your own vacation and help become a sport legend. We talk comedy, writing, and other projects. Welcome to Scheduled for Launch, a podcast to discover projects you may have missed. And this week I am very excited to be joined by Geoffery Golden on the show. Geoffery, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Zach. This is great. I'm excited to be on the show. I'm excited to do this chill hang. We're gonna chill. We're gonna hang, and we're gonna talk about fun projects. What better way to spend your time?
Exactly. We're gonna be talking about Target Run specifically today. Gonna talk about a couple other little things because you've done a lot of stuff.
I have done a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you have. So, which, like, people who are listening to this could be like, hey, wait a second, isn't that the D&D one? I'm like, yeah, okay, here's the thing. I don't hate D&D. Like, I have, like, so a big thing on the show was I was like, I don't know if we'll ever bring anybody on for a D&D thing. And then the next week I brought somebody on for a D&D thing. I was like, I don't know if I'll ever do that again. And here we are.
You didn't. Listen, here's the thing. It's, I love indie RPGs. I've created and published indie RPGs in the past. Wow. But it's also, I recognize that it's difficult to fight City Hall. Dungeons and Dragons, it's like Xerox or Kleenex. It's like it's what people think of when they think of role-playing games. So, my hope is to just do it with working with D&D is to make something really different, make a different kind of experience, something fun and unique that you wouldn't normally get at your local game shop. And that's what I'm trying to do with Target Run.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in just a moment. But before that, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Well, I'm a game designer and a narrative designer. My day job is I work in video games as a narrative designer, and which means I do everything related to story. So anything related to story, characters, quests, that kind of stuff falls under my umbrella. And I've worked for Capcom, Ubisoft, Square Enix, Disney Interactive, and for indie studios around the world. In the RPG space, I'm a game designer. Some of my tabletop projects include Helm Greycastle for Image Comics, Wet Hot American Summer Fantasy Camp RPG.
When I saw that, I was like, oh, I need to get him on. Because I had seen that. I was like, I know what that one is.
Have you so are you familiar with the movie or Netflix series of Wet Hot American Summer?
I'm familiar with both, and I just haven't had the time.
I used to actually watch it. Well, listen, I love the movie. The movie is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it was a real honor to pitch that to David Wayne, who is the director of the film, and to have him be like involved with it, along with some of the actors from the film. It was a really cool project, really like a really weird thing. It's what ended up happening with the Wet Hot game, which is really funny. So there's the Wet Hot American Summer movie and the Wet Hot American Summer Netflix series, and the movie features D&D prominently. It is an important part of the film. I would definitely call it like a film. Like if you're thinking about like films that have D&D in them in like a fun way, like I would definitely put Wet Hot American Summer on that list.
Okay.
But the Netflix series doesn't have it. So there were definitely fans of Wet Hot American Summer who only know the Netflix series, who are very confused by the idea of a tabletop role-playing game like a Wet Hot American. Like, why would you do a Wet Hot American Summer role-playing game? It makes no sense. It's like, well, have you seen the movie? It's like, there's a movie? And it's like, I don't understand, because the Netflix series is like specifically called like 5 years, like it's like they're prequel. It's like a prequel and then a sequel to the movie. So to me, it's weird to not have seen the movie, but whatever, to each their own. But it was a really fun project to work on, and yeah, if you want to role play in a crazy camp environment, in a summer camp environment, and have one wild day at camp with your friends, I recommend tracking down Wet Hot American Summer Fantasy Camp. I think you can still get it on Amazon. It's like a rare book now, but I think you can still find like copies of it.
So funny. Just I love the concept too. Just like in general, I think it's so good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's activities based. So
Yeah.
so it's like if you're a camper, there's two different tracks. There's like the camper and the counselors.
Okay.
The campers are like assigned tasks that they're assigned like their day is like scheduled out for them, sort of like with mini activities. So they like a bunch of mini games. But the campers, they're assigned a bunch of tasks that they're supposed to avoid in order to get into adventures. But if they get caught, they'll get in trouble. So there's two like very different ways to play the game. One is you could play it like very much like regimented, like a fun day, like by the books kind of camp experience. And the other is like an experience where you get into trouble and scrapes and all kinds of weird fridge humping action. It's a lot of fun. If you're familiar with the movie, you understand fridge humping action makes a lot of sense to you. And if not, you're like, what's
like
he
me
talking
right now.
about? You're fridge humping? Why is there fridge humping in this game? Yes, there's fridge humping in the game and the original comedy film. It's a great scene, so I won't spoil it, but it's a very funny scene in the film.
So, what is Target Run then?
Yeah. So Target Run is taking sort of similar principles. So Wet Hot American Summer, the role play game Fantasy Camp based on the film, and that film is based on 80s camp movies, summer camp movies like Meatballs and State Park. It's other ones that are sort of in this genre of camp and outdoorsy 80s comedies, and I love goofy, weird like 80s movies and 90s movies too. It's definitely there was for a while there was a YouTube account that was called It Came From the Bargain Bin, and it was what a service that was. I think it got shut down, but what a service it was, because it had like all these weird movies that you can't find them anywhere. It's not like these are movies, HBO Max isn't prominently featuring, Snow Bunnies 4, but these YouTube accounts have them, and they're trashy and silly and fun. So anyway, one of my favorite movies of all time is Caddyshack. I love Caddyshack. I'm a big fan, and so I was taking this class during the pandemic. This write your first role-playing game workshop, your first D&D game workshop. Now, to this point, I had already written a number of tabletop role-playing projects, but friends of mine kept asking me, do you know how to write like a D&D encounter? Like, do you know how to write D&D campaigns? And enough people asked me that I was like, maybe I should learn how to do this, because people are sort of like projecting it onto me as like, oh, I must be a guy who knows how to do this. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll follow that path and see where it takes me. So there's a class, the RPG Writers Workshop, and I decided to take it. And one of the pieces of advice that they give you is to base your first encounter on a movie or a film or TV show or property that you really like. And I was like, oh, like, could there, like, what about like D&D sports? What about like a D&D sports comedy? That could be really interesting. And so that's what Target Run is. Target Run is a D&D sports comedy in the style of Caddyshack, Mighty Ducks, Major League, these like Slobs versus Snobs comedies. And your adventuring party are accompanying, you're the entourage of Tazfan, who is a wealthy and fun-loving dwarf who is trying to break the elf ceiling in the world of Allegan, which is like an elves-only sport that's played in an elite country club in the trees called Overtop Heights. And so you're trying to help her break into the sport. And the way that you do it is by challenging the current champions to a game of Allegan. So it's you and your party who've never played before. You're the Slobs versus these snobby, elite, elven, high elf players who control the fate of Tasman. And meanwhile, you could get into all kinds of crazy hijinks at the overtop heights. You could really trash the place, but there's a lot to explore. There's a conspiracy going on. There's a group of pixies, revolutionary pixies that you need to help. You could do food fights. You could do wild stuff. There's like a spa, so like you can relax in tree sap, and like you could do the whole thing just like a relaxing vacation for your characters too. Like there's this whole other track that you could go on. So yeah, it's trying to bring that spirit, that anarchic, fun spirit. And at the heart of it is the game Allegan, which is a sport, a D&D sport that you can play, and you can take it out of Target Run and put it into your own homebrew campaign. So it just comes out, like a Lego brick, and you can put it into your own campaign too if you want a fun. And it's an archery sport. It's like team archery. So you think like hockey meets archery meets laser tag, and that's Allegan.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty fun stuff.
That's actually something I wanted to sort of bring up in this one is that on the blurb that you sent me from DM's Guild, Target Run's kind of like a palate cleanser that you can just kind of like pick up and drop into your own game.
Right.
What goes into designing a game that works like that?
So that's a great question. So for me, it was really thinking about my own campaigns and thinking about like what would I want as as a character. When I play, I always think about, okay, we go climb these mountains with our characters. We go into a volcano. We go fight a dragon in a cavern, and then we come back to town. And it's like immediately like we go to a job board and it's like, here's the next thing you're doing. And it's like, God, that's exhausting. Like if I was that character, I'd be exhausted.
Yeah,
right?
That makes sense.
I mean, yeah, like I could go and I could sleep it off. I guess I could take a healing potion or whatever. But like I don't feel like that's like restful for your soul, like as a character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was just thinking about like, what about like a vacation setting, like treating it like you're on break, which is great. It's like a pit stop between your epic adventures. It's the classic in the TV show. It's the beach day episode, or there's always an episode, there's always in a story, you always want that like rest stop, that like, especially in like a heavy action, if you're going back to back to back with these things, you want one where it's like funny or different or, as sort of a palate cleanser. So that was what I was thinking, like trying to serve players, serve a dungeon master, and also like with a homebrew campaign, it's a lot of work, especially like a long running one. It's tons of work putting into creating these things. So I just thought, wouldn't it be cool to give them something that to give the DM a break too? Here's something that they don't have to design from whole cloth. You can insert this in maybe while you're also in the background, like haven't quite figured that out yet. I'm still working on that. So maybe I could just put this in as just slide that right in. It's just like something fun we can do, like a school field trip, like, we're going to go to the science center this today, we're doing something different, get us out of the classroom, let's get us out of the mindset of, okay, we beat up a dragon this week. Next week, we're going to take on a beholder. It's like, well, hold on a minute. Like, time out. Like, let's go to a resort and relax. Yeah. And make some money. Yeah. Tasman is very wealthy, and she's a good tipper too. So, you will like her company.
And as I sort of stated before, you've written a lot of stuff, but from most, not all, but most, a lot of your games that you've designed and your content, it typically has like a really heavy comedic twist, which is so hard to write in this space. It is like, you can, your brooding modules are a dime a dozen. I'm sorry, everybody's made their fantasy heartbreaker,
right?
So obviously part of it is because of what you write for companies, but what draws you to making sure that you write your games with a comedic twist?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of my voice. I grew up, I loved video games. I grew up playing playing tabletop games, but I was always most attracted to things that were funny. It's just been my life. When I was very, very young, my dad would make me these like mixtapes of his like favorite comedy sketches and stuff. So, it'd be like Monty Python and Stan Freberg, Bob and Ray. I had a lot of old radio tapes, and I loved comic books. I loved, I had a complete collection of like Garfield treasuries. I loved reading the old Garfield books. Oh yeah, Mike. In fact, I loved Garfield so much that I would do my sister's chores to get her Garfield books. That's how much I loved. That's how much I loved Garfield books. She'd be like, "Oh, if I do your chores for 2 weeks, can I get that? Can I get Garfield Goes Hollywood?" And she'd be like, "Make it 2.5." It's like, God damn it! All right, I really want that book, and I don't have any money. I am a child, so I guess this is what's happening. So I've always been attracted to comedy, and even playing some of my earliest tabletop games, I wanted to infuse comedy when I would play. So there was a game called one of the first games I ever played was called Aberrant, which was. You're familiar with it? I think it's now it's published by Onyx, but before it was published by White Wolf. I think that was
that's how it goes.
Yeah. And it's like an X-Men universe. So you have these characters, Novas, who are like mutants, and they get their powers in adolescence, and you form superhero teams. Yeah. And I loved the game. I thought it was super engaging. It was really, really cool. But I wanted to play. I was a really big fan of the Tick. I was also a big fan of X-Men, but I was also a really big fan of the Tick. So I wanted to play a character that was kind of like the Tick. So I ended up creating the Wire Whisk, who is a mutant chef who, when the sound of the whisk slashing through the air is like a call to animals in the area. The animals will come, so squirrels will come, or chipmunks will come, or whatever, and attack our enemies and distract them, or what have you.
Yeah.
And so my first instinct is generally comedy. I do this series called Adventure Snack, which is like you probably maybe have saw it on my site.
I went through a little bit.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's a mini RPGs by newsletter, and so it's like it's like choose your path adventure games. They're funny and they're in different genres and they're silly, and they come to your email. And I love writing them. I love exploring genres and like exploring ideas, and humor is a good way to do that, because it's humor's all about like breaking down boundaries and like examining stuff and like really thinking about it, and that's kind of my instincts as a designer. And so I like Adventure Snack because it gives me an opportunity to do that with a lot of different things. And this was true with Target Run too, where I was thinking a lot about like combat in D&D, and it was like, how can you make it how can you make it
fun?
How can you make it fun? like fun and not in the sense of but someone might be like, combat's very fun. Dungeons and Dragons is very fun. What are you talking? Not like fun in the sense of like fun to play, but fun like lighthearted fun. My
character's not scared he's going to be killed right now.
Exactly. It more like you'd see in like the Mighty Ducks or whatever. Yeah. Like that's like combat of a sense, of like the checking into the thing, and then she's like, I'm a girl and I can skate better than you, and then she like swirls around. Like that's fun. Like I love that. Like that's fun stuff, Yeah,
it's the little bit that I've read of Target Run so far has been very interesting and very fun. I could see I think more people need to try out modules like this because they break up the pace. Like the last game that I was in was a lot of fun, but it was dark, and it was a lot of dark. And it was a lot of dark for really long stretches of time. And then I was just like, all right, big scary twist. Okay, now we're going to the next one. And I loved it. But eventually it just kind of like, I think this is a really good way to kind of reset. Like, your characters would want to break.
Exactly. It's just natural. Like, we don't go from... I mean, look, it's like for characters in D&D, adventures are their job. Like, they go and they accept these quests. It's their job. And, like, jobs can be fun. Like, you can have a fun job. I have a fun job. But it doesn't mean I don't want to break every once in a while. It doesn't mean I want to go, relax in a spa or whatever, in a hot tub, and just not think about writing for a minute, And that's what I hope Target Run will provide for characters. A chance to get away from the darkness and the brooding, and try something different, and may have a memory. I find that the things I remember most in D&D or in tabletop roleplay games are the sessions that really stood out to me. They aren't the ones that it's the same thing that we usually do. It's the one that we did something different, something strange happen. And I think players are hungry for that. There's that meme of the DM says, I created this waiter character with a funny accent who was meant to be in the game for literally like a minute, and the players end up inviting him to drink at their table, and pretty soon he's like part of their party, and I've got to do this like funny voice. But the players will never forget the day that they met this funny voiced waiter guy, because it's like, so it's just stands out to them as something that was so different from what they would normally do, And that's the energy I think that Target Run brings. It's like, this is something different, something you maybe haven't done before.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk a little bit about previous relationships with 5e, specifically your work with Helm Grayskull.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that was something that you helped develop, and it's a different tone, right? Like, it's like...
Yeah, Helm Greycastle is like a whole other thing. It's like a whole other thing. It was great. It's the brainchild of Henry Barajas, who's a very talented comics creator. He's worked for Top Cow and for Image, and I think now for Oni Press. He had this great idea, and he sought my help with it in the beginning. But basically, It was like, there's a magazine called Rolled and Told. I don't know if he ever contributed to it, but I did. I was one of the game designers for this magazine, Rolled and Told. And basically, the idea was to bring together the comics world and the D&D world. And it was a hit. It was a hit in game shops. People definitely picked it up. It was the victim of a merger between two companies. It sort of got lost.
That's
it got
unfortunate.
It sort of got lost in the shuffle. But it's collected in two lovely archives from I believe published by Oni, and you can pick them up at your bookshop.org.
Okay.
So you can look for Rolled and Told. My stuff is in the second volume, so I strongly recommend the second volume of Rolled and Told. I hear that one's even better than the first. No, they're both great. But anyway, I think it stuck in Henry's mind. It's like, what if we did, instead of a magazine, what if it was like a comic, and then you could take those characters and you could play them in the same issue. So one issue of Helm Greycastle is both an ongoing comic series and adventure series that takes place in ancient Aztec times, and it's like a fantasy adventure in that space. And then you have these 7-page supplements, these 7-page modules where we take those characters and we bring them to your table. We bring them to the game, to your game table. And I thought it was a really cool idea, and I talked with him about it, about asked him some questions that were hard for him to answer at first, and then we would talk again like 3 months later, and he'd be like, okay, I think I figured out this. And then I'd be like, okay, but did you figure out this? And he'd be like, hold on a minute. And then I talked to him like 4 months later. But eventually he nailed it, and I think it's great. I think the series is really cool. I wrote the module for issue 2 out of I think it's a 4-part series. I think they're really fun. We've play tested it, and it's really cool. So the one I wrote is called Belly of the Beast, okay. And you are I guess DMs pay attention, but if you're a player and you don't want to be spoiled, fast forward a little bit. It's fast forward a minute or two.
Click that 30-second button a couple times.
Click the 30-second button a couple times, exactly. But basically the premise is you are helping Helm Greycastle. Helm Greycastle's his arc is he's trying to find this prince who has been a kidnapped prince. And in the module, he thinks that the prince has been kidnapped in this ancient temple where human sacrifices take place. It's like very well known that like people come into this temple and they don't come out. And it turns out that the temple itself is actually doing the sacrifices. It is a monster that was brought to life by the evil magician in the book, and it basically has an unquenchable thirst for blood. And so you know how like the gelatinous cube like is designed to like go around the halls of the dungeon and like eat refuse and stuff. Imagine instead of a gelatinous cube, it's like the temple fills with like that kind of slime, like a digestive fluid that comes in and like eats all the organic matter that's in the temple. And you and the adventurers, including Helm, are the organic matter. So there's treasure to be found. There's puzzles to be solved, and there's a ticking clock as you have to escape before you are eaten by the temple itself. So it was a lot of fun. And that's like, because the format itself is so inventive, it feels more like a traditional module. But I like the mechanic of like because like, you have like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Right? I like the idea that the dungeon itself was sort of the dragon. That like the temple was the big bad. The place you're exploring is alive and is a problem, So that's Helm Greycastle issue 2, Belly of the Beast, with artwork by Jen Vaughn, a map by Jen Vaughn, and she's a very, very talented artist in the dungeoning, the D&D scene.
I love that setup so much. How did the experience with that though help with the development of something like Target Run?
So, it's actually the reverse.
Oh.
Target Run helped me develop Helm Greycastle. And it's a funny thing. So in the class, they tell you, okay, use a movie to like inspire your game, right? In this RPG workshop. And so I was like Caddyshack. I'm going to do Caddyshack. But the thing was, like, for me in my brain, like in my writer brain, so I've written, in addition to games, I've written a lot of other stuff. I've written television and film and audio fiction and a lot of stuff. And so for me, it's like, okay, like I'm writing a movie, right? That's how I interpreted it in my head.
Yeah. And
so I wanted to give it that sort of movie structure, that sort of 3-act movie type structure, right? With the module. And it ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would be. It ended up being, I was trying to keep it short, but it ended up being like 30 some odd pages, which, that's a pretty significant piece of writing, and so, there's a lot of testing that comes with that. There's a lot of, I did a lot of research. It was like a big, big thing. And so from everything I learned about designing D&D modules, working on Target Run and finishing that, I was then able to take that into the shorter 7-page and be like, oh, okay, here are a bunch of tricks of the trade that I learned going, while working on Target Run that I can apply to make the process of writing this module a lot easier. The Helm Greycastle module a lot easier. So it ended up being more about I ended up learning efficiency in D&D game design. I ended up learning how to streamline, how to figure things out faster by doing the big thing, which for any aspiring game writers, game designers out there, I would not recommend doing that. I did it the opposite way. What I would recommend doing is start with the 3-page, the 1-page, 3-page, 5-page module and build something small and that's with a beginning, middle, and end that is functional, that works, that you've play tested, and then start slowly expanding and building bigger things and then eventually your dream project, which I would say for most creators is probably, something like a 30 to 50 or maybe long, maybe a multi-series, adventure module or something like that. Mm-hmm. I'd recommend building up to that. Start small. Start with your prototype adventure. But I had a lot of experience doing tabletop design before, so I knew what I was. I knew from the basic mechanics of how to do it. But I guess with that prompt of make it like a movie, I took that to the extreme. I took that to I want that emotional arc. I want that the pathos. I want I want the potential to hit those beats in the story, or at the very least, if not that, an adventure that felt substantial like a movie does for an audience member. And so I would go I could definitely go the opposite way, for something. But yeah, anyway, that's what I learned.
Speaking of like a movie, before we actually did this interview right now, we had a fair bit of back and forth that lasted a couple weeks, mainly because I'm really bad at responding to emails. I am notoriously bad for that, as known by basically every interviewee that has been on this show.
You're not by far.
I'm not the worst.
Definitely
I'm just not great.
It's not great. Anyway, so yeah, we were talking on email. Slowly but surely.
Slowly but surely. One of the things that you told me about was one of your current favorite tabletop role-playing games, which is called Straight to Video by Ryan Mellon and...
Oh, yeah. Straight to VHS is the title
Straight
of
to
the game.
VHS. Wow. Why did I write video? I have it right here. Anyway, Straight to VHS. I looked at it, the open beta. First of all, it's really freaking cool. But it's got a really similar tone to Target Run.
Yeah. For sure.
Can you tell me a little bit about what goes into making a game get that vibe? Because Target Run and Straight to VHS both have that very much this is 80s, 90s.
Right. The way in my opinion, the thing that makes 80s and 90s so much fun is the emphasis on, as they say and it's a mechanic in Straight to VHS, pushing it to the limit, right? There's a movie called Van Nuys Boulevard. I think it's late 70s, early 80s movie.
Okay.
And in this movie, it's a comedy about cruising culture in California. So this was a time when before you would swipe right and swipe, with mobile apps, the way you would meet people is you would get in your car and you'd go to Van Nuys Boulevard. You just drive around and stuff would happen to you. And so there's a scene in this movie where a guy gets a giant hoagie and he's like, I really want to eat a sandwich. I really want to eat this giant sandwich. And the kid opens up his mouth really wide. And then you cut to an emergency room because he's dislocated his jaw trying to eat a giant sandwich. Now, is this the type of movie that is deeply concerned with like the logic of that. Like, it's possible that somebody could injure themselves eating a giant sandwich, but it's just so weird. It's like such like a weird idea, and it's like so I think to get that energy, you have to kind of be willing to like throw stuff at the wall, and like that includes so it doesn't mean making characters without pathos. I think Tazfan actually has quite a bit of pathos as a character, and you can end up, you'll feel something for her for sure. And there's other characters too, like the Pixies, who have sort of a deeper story. But then there's others that I paint with a very broad brush. There's like stooge characters. There's like elf stooges. There's, the villain is Yelbalar, and he's like a real asshole. Like there's a clueless receptionist at the hotel who doesn't know anything about other races besides elves and asks you like inappropriate questions. And it's just like being unafraid to bring in characters that are like defined by one funny character trait. It's like it's like clueless or angry or belligerent or klutzy. Just being able to put those characters in and then just like heightening on that, as they say in comedy, you heighten on it. So it's like, okay, in this scene, the Stooges are scheming, but it's clear that they're not very good. In the next scene, they like literally bump into each other and knock each other out. In the following scene, they end up accidentally tying themselves up with rope. This doesn't actually happen in Target Run, but I'm just giving you like a sense of like, okay, like their character trait is that they're bumbling. So like, how do we like heighten that and make that like more fun throughout?
Okay.
Yeah. So in the case of Target Run, like the stakes get higher as the game goes on. You realize that there's a lot more happening here than just a game of just a sport Allegan, that it actually like there's like a marriage is at stake, which is always funny to me. There's a group of, as I said, pixie revolutionaries who are trying to take back the land that this was that the spa was built on. It's rightfully theirs. There's all these things you can learn about the characters and the story that sort of heighten the stakes as you go on. So by the end, you really want to win this game because it's like, it'll mean something to you depending on how you explore the world.
Okay.
So yeah, and straight to VHS, it's all about it's all about these broad stock characters. So there's like werewolves, like skateboarding werewolves. There's like, the
most memorable picture. I love that art piece so much.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I love it too. It's so much fun. There's like all the, basically in straight to VHS, they do tropes. And so you build a character based on two tropes. So it's like hacker and talking animal. And you put that together. It's like, okay, what does a hacker talking animal look like? And then you figure that, that out. So yeah, because it's a way of like creating, just having fun with it, like letting go and not going too heavy on lore and backstory, like just painting it with a kind of with a broad brush where the player gets the idea.
Yeah,
that's it. As opposed to trying to like explain everything or making them feel all the feels, you sort of are just like, I am just dedicated to like entertaining you as a player with like the craziest action and the most unexpected twists and like these fun characters and just going for it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's so much fun. I totally forgot to mention when we started Target Run. It debuted as #1 for hottest community comedy on DM's Guild. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Second, how did you feel about that?
I felt great. I was really surprised. It's my first thing on DM Skill. Not the first thing I've ever done, but the first thing I did on this platform. Mm-hmm. I felt very welcomed by that. the folks from my Adventure Snack newsletter, they were picking it up. Folks who had just seen it on DM's Guild were picking it up.
Yeah.
People who, in various Discords and stuff that I'm a part of, they were picking it up. And it ended up it ended up debuting at number one. I was just super happy with it. It was very exciting.
That's so good. We're actually starting to run a little bit low on time here, Geoffrey. But
Yeah.
one of my favorite things to ask every designer who comes on the show is about what advice could you give somebody who is looking to start making their own project, but they've never really done it before. They don't know where to start. Where do you think that they should focus? What are some things that they should keep in mind?
Great. Well, I'll reiterate what I said before, which I think is worth highlighting, which is to start small. I tried running several years ago, like for the first time. And I'd never gone running before, but I was like, I want some exercise. I'm going to go running. And I just
story.
Yeah, and you just I went outside and I was started running. And then in 2 minutes, I was exhausted. And I was like, this is the worst thing in the world. I am so out of shape. I will never be able to run. And then a couple weeks later, I discovered an app called Couch to 5K. And what Couch to 5K does is it acclimates you to running. You start by jogging. You start by just walking. And then it'll be jog for a minute. Try just jogging for a minute. And then you jog for a minute. And then it's let's walk for 10. And over time, what it does is with every session, it slowly acclimates you to running. You get to do less jogging, more running. And now I can run a 5K, which is really cool. But it's a long process to get there.
Yeah.
I think for creative projects, it's we see the thing that we want to emulate, right? And it's usually it's a big, crazy thing. In video games, it's commonly an RPG. So I love Final Fantasy, I love Dragon Quest, or whatever. I want to create an RPG. I want to create a 400-hour video game, role-playing game. And that's very, very difficult to do as your first project. It's not impossible, but what will probably happen is you'll get frustrated. There'll be a lot of technical challenges you don't understand. There's so many mechanics in these types of games that you'll lose track of them, and you'll be building I want to build this, but I don't know how to do this, and it'll be so overwhelming that you don't that you this isn't for me.
Yeah.
So I would say as a designer, it's great to prototype. Make something small. There's a great, every year they do this game jams, the one-page RPG jam.
Yes.
Great opportunity to just make something quick. I made one this year that was a theme park design game. It's just it's like a game where you role play as theme park designers, and everybody makes their own ride and then tours the other players through it, and then you create a theme park at the table. And you have a memorable day at the park. It took me, an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe to do it. It was a very simple mechanics. It was a very simple design. And I made something, and I put it out there into the world, and now I can make another, now I've had that experience. And so when I go and I make another thing that's maybe slightly more complicated, I have that experience to draw from.
Yeah.
So that's something I would keep in mind. I'd also say, don't be afraid to be cliche. I think a lot of people, when they make stuff, they are worried that their stuff is too derivative. And when we first start out making stuff, what we're going to make is copies of the thing we like, the thing that inspired us to get into doing it in the first place. That's just a natural part of the process. I say don't be afraid to be cliche. Right? Just write. just like write or just make the thing. It's in your head. Make a small thing that's in your head. Doesn't matter if you've played 100 versions of it before. Be 101, because the point isn't to make the most mind-blowing thing. The point is to just get practice in terms of building the muscle memory to do it and the knowledge base to do it. And then from there, you can build up and make bigger and grander things.
That's such good advice. That's really good advice. Like,
thank you.
And for more than just writing too, though, just like start small. Like, start small, get bigger.
Absolutely. With art, it's the same thing. You maybe you're not going to draw. You're not going to draw the Mona Lisa on your first day out.
No.
You're going to learn. You have to learn anatomy, if you're an abstract artist, whatever. I generally would advise an artist to learn anatomy as like a first step,
because that's how I started.
Yeah, exactly.
You
got to learn
anatomy course.
You got to learn where the body parts how they work, and what's going on with them. And then you draw simple line work first, and just practice getting curves, practice the motions, practice flowing, just the little elements here and there. And then you sort of build your style. You start by a lot of people trace when they first start drawing. I think that's totally fine. The traced, your traced Wolverine isn't going to be isn't going to get you into Marvel Comics on your first day, but that's not the point. It's a journey. You're learning how to draw the comic. You're learning how to draw anatomy and fine art and stuff, and over time you will build up the confidence and the skill set to be able to make those big things.
Yeah, that's great advice. Like, I'm not even being like joking around or anything like that.
No.
You got to start small.
Start small, build big.
So we've actually gone for just under 50 minutes now.
Cool.
So Geoffrey, where can people find out more about you and Target Run?
Absolutely. Well, Target Run is on the DMs Guild. You can just go to dmsguild.com. You put in Target Run in the search, and you'll see it. It's got a big bright cover with a big target on it. You can't miss it. Great illustration by Matt Rice, who's a terrific illustrator.
Yeah.
You can find me on Twitter at Geoffery Golden. I spell it Geoffrey, like the giraffe, and Golden, like the color. And you put those two things together. Wow, you got a Twitter page. You can follow me there. And you can also you follow my newsletter, Adventure Snack. It's free every 2 weeks. It's a new Choose Your Path adventure game that I send to my subscribers. And I also write about some of the things I'm working on. And you can get that at adventuresnack.com. Yeah,
and go follow Geoffrey. There's a lot of really cool stuff that he does. He does just like, and it's just like, it's a change of pace that's so nice. Like, I love it so much, and I love my dark fantasy. I love all that stuff, but like, just having something I can sit down and be like, this is what I'm doing for today, and I'm really looking forward to it, is such a treat. Like, I don't have to worry about the character I've been playing for 2 years falling down a hole and breaking both of his legs and like dying. Like,
yeah, let that character get drunk at a party and and crash a snooty party and
threaten an elf, I guess.
Yeah, play air guitar and people chant his name. Like that's fun. That's a fun adventure too. Zach, thank you so much. This whole evening is a nice change of pace. Nice sitting down and talking with you. You've got a great vibe. You have a great vibe.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm still trying to figure out what that word means sometimes, but I appreciate that. So everybody, go follow Geoffrey and go check out Target Run. He's got a lot of stuff that's going on, and like that newsletter, it's really cool. So make sure you're going to follow that. All that stuff, that's going to be down in the description below. I'll get that off of you, Geoffrey, and we can just plug that below so people can click on it and go right there.
Terrific.
As always, thank you for joining us. Geoffrey, thank you for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And I just want to wish you all, what the fuck does that mean? I just want to thank you all for coming here and joining us. So have a good night. Take care of yourselves. See you next time. Bye.
We wish you all.
Yeah, we wish you
holiday, happy Halloween.
Oh,
happy
yeah,
Halloween.
I guess this is coming out right before Halloween. Happy Halloween.
Ooh, scary.
Spooky game.
There we go. Halloween.
Take care, everybody. Geoffery and Target Run. They're already launched, so go get it. Have a good night. Bye. Thank you so much to Geoffery for coming onto the show this week. I honestly can't remember the last time I laughed so much, and he just has an incredible vibe. Geoffery has a lot of different works out there, and they are really accessible and easy to find, so I highly recommend looking into them, Target Run specifically. And thank you, listener. It's hard to believe, but we are coming up onto a year since we started this journey together, and I am so excited we've been going this long. If you like the show and want to hear more, please let someone know what you think, or consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. Word of mouth is the best way for us to grow, but fighting giant algorithms might be the second. Next week, we have a very interesting episode with Tanya Floker, a small indie designer with a very interesting game called Be Seeing You. I hope to see you all there. Until then, take care of yourselves. Bye.